you have to get in with the fabric of the community and understand what's going to work there and what people are desiring. And I think that's what can make you a really special, talented developer.
This episode brought to you by Suites at Madison. Meeting and conference rooms for rent by the hour, week, month, or year. Suites at Madison, where business gets done. Check them out at www.downtowntampaoffice.com. Now, on to the show.
You are listening to the Invest Florida Real Estate Show, covering topics in lending, buy and sell strategies, property management, hot markets, and tips and tools to guide you along the way on your path to real estate success. You want Florida investment real estate talk? You have come to the right place. And now, our hosts, Eric Odom and Steven Silverman.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Invest Florida Real Estate Show. This is your co-host, Eric Odom, along with Steven Silverman. Steven, big project going on in your world. Why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
Well, it is interesting because the whole commercial real estate market is moving towards mixed use, and everybody talks of mixed use, but sometimes they don't always think it through. So this was a project that took, which I was the broker for. Eric and I are both brokers, but it took me 3 years to really put together, and it involves a multifamily and retail and self-storage. And there was tremendous opposition to having self-storage as part of mixed use. But if you think about it, it's a really important component of mixed use, because as people move into apartments and offices come in, they're all smaller than the homes they lived in, and they have nowhere to store. The problem is traditional self-storage looked ugly. So now this project comes along, and I think it'll be a beacon for the rest of developers in the country, because this self-storage is going to be indistinguishable from the multifamily and retail, and it should make it much more acceptable to mixed-use communities everywhere.
Well, we've got actually a mixed-use developer. Really, he's an apartment developer, but he does infill projects and does a little bit of unusual development that's going to be on the show today, and we're looking forward to talking about that. But he's also done variety of different residential types of deals, and said that there's some retail that's inside of his multifamily that he does. So it's been a while since we've had a developer on the show, and looking forward to that. Before we got the ball rolling, wanted to give a shout out to Dan Thompson out of Sarasota. Dan, I apologize, but apparently you left a comment on one of our web pages on the investfloridashow.com and left us a review, and we're just now seeing it. It's been out there for a year or so, but Dan says, a great podcast, good variety of guests, investors, and types of investments. Keep up the good work, Dan Thompson, Sarasota. Dan, definitely appreciate that you spent the time to fill out a review and leave it for us on the website. If you haven't done so, please go to the Apple iTunes or the Google Play Store and leave us a review, and we'll definitely spend the time to read it out. Steven, we work pretty hard trying to get guests on the show.
And those reviews really make a difference, because when we talk to someone, the first thing they do is go and check out the reviews.
Is anyone listening?
Yeah. And if they feel that it's really credible, then we all benefit because we get a good guest.
Yeah. So if you haven't done that, that's one way you can help us out on the show. And we obviously, we don't monetize this. We don't have advertisements paid advertisements. We don't interrupt the show for, to get paid on it. And the way you can help us to try to make our lives a little bit easier is to leave those reviews, number one. And number two, if you have somebody who has a great topic that needs to be covered inside of your market, we cover the state of Florida. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a guest inside of the state of Florida. If you have something that's applicable to everybody, we want to hear that too. So feel free to send us an email and let us know, make an introduction. That would be much appreciated. And Steven, I think unless we've got some other housekeeping, we can roll on to our guest.
Roll into mixed use. Today we have with us Michael Mincberg. Michael is the founder of Site Real Estate. Originally from Washington, D.C., Michael has been a Tampa Bay resident since 2002, where he moved here to attend the University of South Florida. Michael founded Site Real Estate as a development firm specializing in urban infill, ranging from boutique historic repurposing to institutional-grade mixed-use developments. The focus is on urban development, both on repositioning, value-add assets, and on infill new construction. They have a unique approach to real estate investing and develop custom strategies that pair local knowledge and relationships with institutional-level execution. Michael, welcome to the Invest Florida Show.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, Michael, really appreciate you investing time with us today. Why don't you give us sort of a brief overview? You're at the University of South Florida, just a little school down the road here. Actually, I think that's probably the largest school in the country now, isn't it?
It's up there. It's not the largest, but I think they're almost 50,000 student enrollment now. So yeah, it's pretty big.
So you're at the University of South Florida, then you move into real estate and real estate investing. Why don't you give us a little background about how you arrived at the decision to get into real estate and how you got started?
Sure. I really have to give the credit to my older brother, who's, not just a brother, but my best friend and a mentor. And he's super smart, super intense guy. And in college, he was a student body vice president of USF, so always kind of overachieving. And I was a little bit more into socializing in school and having fun. And so I was actually bartending in Ybor City and, having a good time. And my brother said, and I was 18 years old, I think, so like freshman or sophomore year. And he's like, you need to get serious about your life and start thinking about your future. And now I tease him because I'm like, oh, you're just jealous because I was, making a few $100 a night. And all the young ladies wanted to talk to me because I was tending bars. So, but so anyway, at that time, he had bought a house because he, again, was this young, overachieving guy. And I'm like, well, why don't I get into real estate? Kind of more looking at it as like an internship. So over spring break, I made a big sacrifice for a kid at that age. I didn't go on spring break.
Oh, wow.
I took a real estate course instead. Really how I started my career is I got my license and I started holding open houses for a custom home builder in a community. And they had not sold a house or lot in like a couple years.
What year was that?
2004.
So yeah, pre-Great Recession. Yeah.
Pre-Great Recession and kind of, but also not like people didn't realize yet it was like the real estate boom. That was just kind of the beginning at least in Tampa, I should say, of the general public realizing like, hey, there's some great appreciation. So people were like buying, just started buying contracts to flip contracts. But anyway, there was this community, 50 luxury homes in North Tampa, and they hadn't sold anything for a few years. So they said, let's sit this young guy out here in one of the models. And the first 6 months, I didn't sell anything. And I sat there 7 days a week. And the next 6 months.
Were you on commission or were you?
No. Well, yeah, I was on commission. No salary. No even, what do they call it? Like when you get money, you have to pay back. You draw nothing. But I was still bartending. So I had some, and I was going to school full time. And so I sat there and studied, and
that was a good fit. It could drive you to drink.
Yeah, it did. It did at times. But looking back on it, honestly, I'm like, of course, now, like if I got sat there and one of the things, I've told like people who are getting into brokerage is, hey, you got to have savings or a few. And I think that's just common knowledge to have savings or some alternative income stream because it just takes a while to build it up.
Get it going.
You don't get paid in 30 days.
Yep.
So the next 6 months, I ended up selling like 13 lots and 4 homes, and I thought I was on top of the world. And I felt that way. And I was, 19 years old and I just caught a bug from there and I just wanted to learn everything. So I just started going to investors, developers, builders, brokers saying, hey, can I take you to lunch? Can I buy you coffee? I'd like to learn from you. Do you need someone to go to a city council meeting and take notes? Do you need someone to meet a contractor on a Sunday morning? Literally everything, because I think the gift I had was luck, or however you want to see it, was that I had the mentality of this is like an internship. And I think that's
from you were doing your own internship,
being so young, right? From being so young, when really I was being entrepreneurial, but I was investing in my future, not in how do I put the most money in my pocket today. And through that, I just, a lot of the people that I went and did stuff for free for said, hey, I like your work ethic. Can I offer you an opportunity? So I started more on the brokerage side and marketing, infill development projects, townhomes, and just kept wanting to learn. And
so you went into multifamily.
I was going to say, tell us about your first investment.
My first investment that I made was just, I actually had made some money on that second 6 months. And so my brother and I went 50-50 on a new construction townhome. By the time it was built, there was $50,000 in equity. I think he lived in it for like 6 months, and when we sold it, and then I took that money and bought myself a house to live in college with a couple roommates, and then the market dropped and I lost all the money I had into it. So then I held it for like 10 years just to get
above water again.
Yeah, just to. I mean, that's a small story, but it's funny because my mom told me, and times were just different back then. Oh, put 20% on your house down, and I'm not even 21 years old yet. And so I went and I did that. And then I had friends and people in the business who put 0% of money down. They lost all their equity, and, they kind of just, it was actually the smarter move for them, in hindsight,
So tell us how you moved from there and how you evolved to the types of projects you're doing today.
Yeah. Because it's a pretty big path from slinging property for someone that's going to live in to doing multifamily projects. So how did that evolve?
So, I mean, I try not to think about the recession as much as possible, but I think for telling
dark days,
for telling this story, you have to talk about that a little bit. So I started representing urban infill developers and thinking, hey, I'm going to get more on the development side of this, and was sourcing sites and helping plan the project. And, I was like the youngest person in my office and had the most amount of sales going into 2007 under contract, and like 10% of those closed, right? And developments we had plans just didn't happen, and so then it just kind of you just kind of got to a point of, what am I going to do to make a living, and again, I think I was blessed to be going through this at such a young age and being humble and just being on my own too. So not having to support, a whole family. And so I really, at that point, I started doing anything I could for a commission and for a living. So, leasing houses, I did yard work sometimes, whatever needed to be done, because you'd look in a zip code in 2008 or 9 and there'd be like 10 sales in the whole zip code. And, and there was few, 100 realtors specializing in that zip code. So no one was making a living. It didn't matter. And, so we did a lot of leasing for people who couldn't sell. That was the first. And then we started, then the short sale thing started, and so we got heavy into loan workouts and short sales. And I started my own brokerage at that time too, because there just wasn't enough money going around to pay your broker and pay yourself. And also, hey, by the way, there are brokers saying, hey, your investor who bought 3 homes from you or 4 homes from you, we don't want you to cut him a deal on the commission, even though he's losing money on this deal, because they're trying to push you to sell. And I didn't feel like that was the right thing to do for long-term relationships. So that was really what got me out the door to do my own thing was, hey, like, I'm in this for the long haul. I'm looking towards the future. These are relationships.
So what you're really doing is you're giving first. Yeah. And with the expectation in the longer term to get something
You're building
back.
your relationships.
I've just always had a long-term vision on things, and I think it's served me well. So we started doing loan workouts and really, I didn't think there was any rocket science to that. It just was, you had to wake up every day and grind it and be diligent, pick up the phone and call the bank and sometimes the same bank on the same loan 3-4 times a day. And, cause sometimes the loan servicer who worked from on the East Coast shift was not as good as the one who, and you just wanted a different answer, you know? So we started doing a lot of loan workouts, and through that, some of the people that we did them for it was some commercial loan workouts, and they were potential investors. And when they saw what I did, they said, hey, I'd love to buy some stuff at what I'm selling at on a short sale or whatnot. So we started buying a lot of foreclosures and single family homes.
In a brokerage capacity, or were
at
you
that
buying?
point, now I started raising the capital, and
so you're getting your relationships and lining up your capital, and
and this was started, like, I want to say pretty early, 2009. In terms of people investing again, we're doing a lot of fee-based work still because people were not as excited about partnering with a GP and
general partner,
a general partner, and letting you take equity and all that. There was just the demand for real estate investment just wasn't there. So we did a lot of that. We ended up doing a lot of it fee-based, and some we were putting our own capital as we started to make money again. And then we developed a relationship with a single-family home group that ended up getting bought by the Starwood Capital Group. It was one of those larger ones. So we got to a point where we were doing like 20 to 30 single-family homes a month for ourselves and for Starwood. And we also, at that time, everything that we were buying, we were kind of doing that rent model. But what was difference between us and a lot of the other single family home investment groups out there is we were very urban focused, just because that's what I believe in as far as investment opportunity, just, the trend of people moving back to the cities and
that
all
was
that.
Early days. You were early out of the box on that.
Yeah. And
so tell us about your first apartment purchase or development. How did that evolve? How did that happen?
So it just went from a single family to like triplex to quad. I mean, really, I've crawled my way through my career from each level to the next. I haven't skipped a lot of steps. I didn't start working for a big developer and gaining experience. So I've crawled each step of the way. And so I guess the first legitimate apartment deal I did was 12 units, and an investor of mine really pushed. I tried to talk him out of it, and it's a good friend of mine now is Simeon Rice, former football player.
Yeah.
He said, no, Mike. And he's been like a friend, a mentor, and all of that to me. And he's like, no, Mike, we got to go for this. And that's, why he's been so amazing and successful at what he's done is he goes for it, and I've learned that from him. And so we were looking at a 12-unit apartment.
Amazing athlete, by the way. I used to play basketball with him over at the Harbor Island. And he could have been a Division I basketball player. And he was.
His son's actually in the NBA. He was injured this year. It was his rookie year. So
you don't think about this defensive end being. You think about defensive ends, maybe they can run a straight line, they're strong, but this guy was really agile, like amazing, jump through the roof. He's an amazing athlete. Definitely a future Hall of Famer. He's amazing. So he pushed me to do it. So it was 12 units, and when no one was buying anything. So like, it's funny, we did this little 12-unit apartment deal, I think in 2009 or 10, and the press that we got on it was crazy because no one had anything good to write about, and we had to do it all cash at that time. No bank could give you a loan. And we bought this 12-unit deal for like in North Hyde Park in a really good area for like $300,000. Wow.
And I was there every day fighting with the contractors to stay on budget. And like, we ended up being into it for like $700,000. And we sold it a few years later for 1.2 after getting a lot of cash flow. And, but that was kind of the probably, and that was really, the thought at that time, and I still have a very long-term vision. We do some for sale development now, but it was all for rent. Everything we want to do is for rent because you just got burned so bad on for sale development during the recession. So from there, it just, with that success,
blossomed, huh?
it just snowballed, 12 unit, another 12 unit, 24 unit deal, 30 unit deal, 70 unit deal. And we just started doing a bunch of apartments.
Were they with different investors or?
Yeah. It's, and I get the question a lot, especially we have a lot of professional athlete investors in our high net worth pool and entrepreneurs and business people. And I get the question a lot, like, well, how do you get them? It's really, and the answer is do the right thing and we build relationships. And when you do that, people want to help. They recommend, like I get a call sometimes from my investors, like, I've been trying to tell this guy to invest with you, like, I don't get it. Why he won't like come over there and tend to spend the time talk to you to invest, and it's like, it's a great feeling when you hear that from people, but that's really how we've built it.
It's a very cliquish investor group. They'll invest with each other, but if they turn on you, everybody just stops returning your phone calls.
I mean, I think that's across the board in any with any group of people. I mean, it's reputation, and so we've just built it by crawling through it and doing the right thing. And
so, tell us about your deals now. Like you're doing development work, you're doing mostly infill. So, walk us through a project. And why this discussion is so important, because there's so many folks out there, whether they're looking to invest passively or they're actively purchasing. Most apartments that are existing have already turned over in the last 7 years. And to try to get reasonable cap rates is very challenging. And to try to have it make sense to purchase something that was just sold 3 or 4 years ago, it's hard to make sense. So a lot of people are looking at your business and your business model and saying, okay, well, can I do ground up, or can I participate with somebody from ground up? So I think people are going to want to hear, like, your process of how you're making these decisions on these ground up or infill deals. Yeah.
So, I mean, one of the big reasons that we went to ground up is you take a lot of the unknown risks out of it. I mean, a renovation, there's just
open a wall.
There's a lot more potential for change order. Your contingency needs to be a lot higher than, ground up new construction.
Change order. We have to tell people who've not been involved in construction. Contractors love changes, right? Change orders are.
Yeah. And I mean, and frankly, another variable is time. In two ways. I mean, opportunity cost, the time you're going to spend on a renovation. There's more like call in, hey, you need to look at this and make a decision, versus new construction. You're building something off of paper, and also just the time it takes to physically do the work. There's a lot less variables that are going to go into new construction versus a renovation. It's like, oh, we ripped up this floor and we found this layer of tile. We need to stop our demo. We need to have that test for asbestos. Right. That's just one example, and things like that happen all the time. So it's just what I've learned now when I'm doing a renovation is my time and my cost contingency, they need to be huge, or I'm not getting into the deal. I'm not every deal that I do, it makes me want to increase the contingency even more on the next one on a renovation. So ground up, there's a lot less variables like that you can't control. So I think a big part of why we've decided to focus on that is, again, going back to the opportunity cost and the volume that we want to do. We just can't really do it in the renovation space. We're not trying to be a big company with 100 employees. There's about 10 of us in our office, and if we want to do $50 million in development, ground up construction focused on one deal is just a smart way to go, efficient way, I should say.
So what is your focus when you're looking now at multifamily? Because us looking at the outside, I mean, we've got so much new construction coming, but it's all luxury.
Yeah.
So the concern is that, the luxury market will become oversaturated, but there's no way really the people in the middle aren't getting the product.
Yeah. I think the big conversation now is attainable housing. Like, of course, affordable housing is always been a large topic, but I think people who are really highly involved in real estate now know that with the way construction costs are and land prices are and impact fees and all, you cannot build affordable housing without government incentives. And there are a lot of companies fighting over those government incentives to build it, and unless taxes get increased, and then there's not going to be more affordable housing out there. I always tell people it's not the granite that is making the difference between, you know, our cost of having to get high end rents versus affordable. I think there's some more things we can do to get on the attainable side. But again, a lot of that is going to go back to local government and particularly zoning codes and things like that. I mean, a really expensive part of construction is our parking structures, you know.
Preaching to the choir, brother.
Yeah, parking is, and so, I mean, I guess, and going on one tangent and maybe we'll circle back on the other on how we, because you asked affordable and also what we look for. So I guess there's two parts to this answer. I think that, you know, if we can get more zoning codes that are more lenient on parking, and we can get more density, then it's going to create.
There's a big movement for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what you're seeing, guys, we're talking about in Tampa, but I'm seeing this in some of our other markets too. Guys like Bill Carlson, like the mayor, pushing for lower parking requirements and higher density. I don't know if you follow URBN.
They're a Facebook
Jason Ball
page.
And those guys. I would highly recommend anybody who's out there knowing about construction.
They do a great job.
Yeah, constantly pushing on these developments and the government entities to make sure that they're accommodating higher density and lower parking levels, so we can, because dirt's the expensive part, right?
Yeah. Well, construction costs is, like when we're doing a large project, the dirt is, you know, maybe 5% of the total cost, 5 to 10% of the total cost of the project. It's the construction that's expensive, and the parking structure is a big part of that.
So, you know, we've been doing this podcast for a few years now, and a few years ago we had a podcast guest who was involved in the development of autonomous vehicles out of California and how it's going to affect real estate. And interestingly enough, in places like San Francisco, they've gone completely the opposite direction where we are. You know, where we'll come for development and we'll specify you've got to have a minimum of 4 parking spaces per 1,000 for an office development or something. They've gone and said you can have a maximum of 2 parking spaces. And so, because the rationale is with the autonomous vehicles coming, that the whole equation will change, but still that has to take time to develop.
Being in Tampa, you know, it's like, and we talk about public transportation a lot here. It's a hot topic, and it's like it's glorified here. Like people just but I grew up in DC, where at one point I went to a school where I took 2 public buses to get to school. And when we'd go downtown, we'd usually take the subway. And it was not because it was cool. It was because it was the quickest, most inexpensive, efficient way to get places. Like it's not, people are not going to use public transportation until it becomes the most efficient mode of transportation, you know? So, you kind of, the problem has to get worse before people will start using it. But, you know, that's going to make neighborhoods more walkable. I mean, there's a lot that comes from it. It's like anything, growth. There's no growth without some pain in there. I mean, you know, there has to be the good with the bad, but I'm for less parking requirements so that, you know, you can have more affordability, more walkability. It's better for the environment. I mean, I could go on and on reasonings, and I just don't like, I get the big pushback is we don't want people parking on our street, you know. So, okay. So in urban areas, put signs on it's 2-hour parking or you get a ticket, and that's going to force people. Now, me as a developer, I'm saying I feel confident I don't need to provide parking. I'll have enough people who do not need automobiles, who want to rent my apartments or buy my units, and let the market speak for itself. You know?
It's interesting. I was at a meeting, and I've actually heard him talk a number of times, and it always will be some environmental activist will stand up and say, "What are you doing with your building to make sure that it's green and it's LEED and it's this and that?" And his response is just a thing of beauty. He says, "The thing I can do, the best thing I can do for global warming, climate change, is to get people closer to their work. Get them closer to their work. And this is the biggest challenge that we face. And we do these things. We try to, you know, have our buildings green and try to apply LEED principles. But it doesn't do any good if it's 25 miles away from where their office is and where they're having to drive to. So
I'm an urban developer, so I'm going to speak from that perspective. It's what interests me. I is getting into a neighborhood, understanding the character, culture, and what's special about that neighborhood, and developing what I believe works there. And one thing I talk about a lot in our office is like that real estate's half an art, half a science. You got to know your numbers. You have to understand how that all works, but kind of that non-tangible art side of it, per se, if you get that right, then the science and numbers go off boards and everyone's like, oh my gosh, how did you get, and it's just, you have to get in with the fabric of the community and understand what's going to work there and what people are desiring. And I think that's what can make you a really special, talented developer, So
once you're able to get to these attainable apartments that you're developing, what's your exit strategy? Are you holding them? Are you
I would say
them?
Our attainable apartments that we have done are repositioning or repurposing current buildings. Our new construction stuff is not attainable. It's Class A apartments.
Sure. And where are you doing deals right now? You're all over the state, aren't you?
Well, up and down the West Coast. So we have deals in from Tampa in the Seminole Heights neighborhood, Ybor City, North Hyde Park, and all the way down to Fort Myers and Bonita Springs. So as far south as that, what we're looking at now, there's definitely concern of luxury inventory on the market. I think, and I've said this a few times already on this, during this conversation, is a very long-term vision. Our vision now on the apartments that we're developing is long-term hold. I don't think now is the time as a developer to be looking at short-term exits on an apartment side. Now, most institutional investors
they are long-term.
No, the opposite.
7 years.
Right?
Yeah, right now it's I'd say most people want to look at a 7-year maximum. Most of them are pushing more for a 4-year exit or from the developer. And from a development perspective, you're like, if something shifts in the economy and all the inventory going in, if I need to exit in 4 years, my promote's going to get pushed out. Yeah. And great. So I've collected my fees, but it's not really our goal. So we're kind of pushing back on capital, saying, hey, if you don't have at least a 10-year runway, then we're probably not the right partners for each other, because we're looking at sites now. I'm a on the fringe kind of urban pioneering developer. That's like who I am. And there's something fun to me about going and, like I said, understanding the fabric of a neighborhood and putting something there. I'm not a
Davy Crockett, it sounds like.
And you get a lot of arrows in your back when you do that. A lot of times you're going into neighborhoods that the zoning hasn't been approved yet, and you're convincing the neighborhood why it would be good for them. And also you're just making that sell to investors and to banks also of, hey, I know there's no a specific example of this project that I want to do here. And that's why once you prove it, a lot of people come, because it's so much easier to get the capital and financings.
Are you putting retail in your developments?
So some of our projects are mixed use, and we really like the mixed use model. The challenge with it locally is just the regulations on zoning and how much more parking that requires and whatnot. So most of the time, and that's probably the biggest public pushback in urban areas, is, hey, we want more retail, we want more commercial uses, but they don't understand how difficult it is to meet zoning requirements and be able to provide mixed uses or building code requirements.
I just went through one mixed use development project, which it took us over 3 years to get approved, and the constant fights. And I was campaigning myself, handing out flyers to residents because the public opposition and the politicians got on board. But I'd like to ask you something else, which to me is a fascinating topic, and that is adaptive reuse.
Sure.
Like, what kind of buildings become candidates for adaptive reuse? And
let's explain what it is first.
Sure. So adaptive reuse, is taking a building that was once used for one use and make it another use. So like, for example, in St. Petersburg, we turned a historic school into apartments. I love those projects. Probably like my retirement would be only doing stuff like that, because it's so much fun taking like a piece of art that someone created, and especially when you talk about historic properties and the history and character there, and kind of adding to it. There's a saying, and I can't remember the guy who said this, and so I feel bad to not give him a credit. But anyway, it's like responsible development is when the past and the present have a conversation about the future, and that's one of my favorite things to think about when I'm looking at a project.
And also those projects have a lot of personality if they're done right. You can't duplicate that.
Oh yeah. And that's again going back to like the art and science. So it's like, some of the rents we get on our adaptive reuses lead the market. And that's because it's cool and unique and people appreciate it for that. So
yeah, you're living in a cool building. I mean, who doesn't want to live in a school? That sounds like pretty cool to me.
Yeah. They're fun. But like going back to something I talked about, the contingency when you're going through that. I mean, construction codes of a school are built in the 1920s is totally different for residential in 2020,
Right.
So your contingency on time and money, cost just needs to be there. So, I mean, frankly, now where I'm at in my career, if I looked at doing something like an adaptive reuse, the size of it needs to be a lot bigger than what I've done in the past, because it's going to take you 2-3 years to get through a project permitting alone is super difficult, because again, the city's looking at, oh, here's an old school, you're turning to residential. We want you to keep historic elements that aren't up to current fire code or hurricane code.
And then the residents are complaining.
Yeah, so you get comments back from the city about from the fire marshal about something, and then you make the change, and then you get coming back from historic saying change it back, and you're saying, well, what do you want me to do?
Y'all need to sit down and figure it out.
And you lost a month on that, so for me, and that's why I say like, hey, that would like ultimately be my dream to do those like on my own and smaller without, it's just, you have to be very careful getting investors.
Then you add the level of someone else's capital, and you've got this fire breathing down your neck if things are not going exactly right. And it's a challenge.
Yeah.
Talk to us a little bit about the markets. Like, what are some of the markets that stand out to you that go, I'd really like to do more projects in this market? And what are some of the markets you look at and go, it's a little overheated and maybe the regulations are a little bit tough. I'm maybe not going to spend a lot of more time in that market because of that.
Sure. I mean, generally, I feel really good about the west coast of Florida. Southwest Florida is a market that I really like. Moving south down from Tampa through Braden. I mean, Sarasota's on fire. I mean, it's hard to touch. It's a special, unique unicorn market. But,
right.
The Bradentons, the Palmettos, the Fort Myers, which is where we're currently developing our largest project right now, is in downtown Fort Myers. And all the areas in between there, I think when you look really long term, even like the Punta Gordas, I mean, coastal cities that have an urban infrastructure is something that, or I should say, not necessarily coastal, but waterfront cities that have a urban grid system is something that we're drawn to for very long term capital.
Punta Gordas is great.
Yeah, and those municipalities are enthusiastic about getting multifamily in their downtowns. There's even incentives available for them. And so we've been taking advantage of some of those opportunities. And it's kind of what we're really focusing on right now. But it's pioneering again. So the capital and the debt is not come as easy, and you've got to dot your I's and cross your T's. It's not like building another building in downtown Tampa where, if you've got the land, you've got the money.
Yeah, and the markets are evolving, because I remember when Punta Gorda after the hurricanes, like driving down there, everything was flat.
I'm not looking at doing anything right now in Punta Gorda. But I think I just think you looked at the East Coast of Florida and how far it's developed up and down, and the West Coast is just
and
going to follow the same,
and they're bumping
track
up against the Everglades there, where we still have plenty of land to.
Right.
But let's talk about capital. It sounds like you've got a lot of institutional capital that's coming in, some professional athlete capital. What does the debt situation look like? Are you going through insurance companies or the local banks, or how are you acquiring the debt side of the balance sheet?
Yeah, it's coming from both community and national banks. I'll tell you, we're still having lots of opportunities for debt. That's not been a huge challenge for us. I mean, you always want to find the right debt partner, but I think it's because we have a good track record. I mean, I don't think lenders right now are looking to give like first-time developers loans, not at this point in the cycle. And I mean, so I think, for a lot of, I have people come to me saying like, hey, I really want to do this project, but I can't get the debt. I can't get the equity. It's probably because you skipped a step. I mean, for me, that's like I said, I've crawled every step of the way. So I went from 6 units to 12 units to 20 units to 30 units. And I sometimes same thing, like contractors, like I'm trying to bid on these jobs, but I can't get them. And I'll look at them and they'll say, hey, I want to build one of your apartments. I'm like, I can't hire you. You haven't done it before. They're like, well, how do I get there if you don't give me the opportunity? I'm like, go from 50 units to 60 units to 80 units to 100 units. And in 5 years, come back and talk to me, because I'm not going to take the risk of you cutting your
training
teeth on
a contractor.
Yeah. So, I think that's why we have debt opportunities. And I think that's the really only way to do it now, unless you have some crazy strong personal guarantee that, or something else that, a bank can leverage. If something goes wrong, sure, then you can get the loan. Other than that, and I think that's the way it should be, frankly. I think you should have to prove yourself along the way to get debt and capital investments,
Once upon a time, there was a rule of thumb on development projects for apartments that you didn't want to be more than $25,000 per door paying for the dirt. Is there some rule of thumb that you're using? I'm sure that $25,000 is way in the rearview mirror.
No, not true. I mean, we've actually bought land a lot less than that recently, and it's complete. I think it's construction type drives what. Construction type and rents drive what you can pay per door. So that's like one of the questions I get sometimes from people who are not like heavy in the apartment game is, hey, what can you pay per door? And I'm like, that's way too general of a question. It depends what market depends. Am I building a parking structure? Is it surface park? Am I doing 3-story frame construction, or am I doing 8-story precast? So it's totally conditioned by the site and the rents in that market.
And the density.
Yes. Yeah. And more density. I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that more density equals a higher price per unit on the sale, and that it's actually the opposite. Yeah, because your construction cost goes up. So I can pay more for land like in a suburban area where I'm going to do garden style apartments with surface park than I can per unit, I should say. I can pay more per unit than I can pay per door or per unit on a urban site that's going to be concrete block, garage wrap construction.
Sure, you're going to put the first 5 floors of parking and then
It's just by construction, because you think about it, hey, I want to be into it for $175,000 a door. Well, with my construction cost, I'm getting the same nominal rent of $1,400 for a 1-bedroom. So I need my all-in cost per unit to be the same, just using round numbers. If my construction costs, I'm building a 3-story frame apartment is less than 5-story concrete block with a parking structure.
A question I'd like to ask you, when you look around at the market now, and you take stock of the market and you really do your homework and you look at all your costs, do you see people like developing and taking risks or things that you just wouldn't be taking now in this market? I mean,
yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Of course. It's always that way. And sometimes I'm wrong and sometimes I'm right, I'm at first and foremost, I try to always remain a student, and keep that same perspective of when I started, that I'm trying to continue to learn. And
when you stop learning, brother, the game's over, man.
It's just not, I mean, and I enjoy it. It's like, when you stop learning, you start dying, really. I mean, you need your brain to keep going.
Because it's interesting. Like when the last recession came, I mean, you didn't see it at the time, but in retrospect, you saw people just doing things that didn't make a lot of sense.
I mean, I didn't know enough back then, frankly, to evaluate deals like I do now. Now it's like my brain's like a matrix. I look at a building, I know what it costs to build it, and what their environmental issues might have been in this area, and like all this stuff is going through my brain, like it's second nature, but, I can't walk into a building or drive by a building without thinking through the deal. Probably drives my wife crazy, but, all the time. And I see deals out there that I feel like there's no way they're going to work. And I've been proven wrong sometimes. And I think maybe that's just the conservative nature of myself, and probably people have looked at deals I've done and said the same. I'm sure they have, because we're pioneering developers.
Those infield deals, and then people are like, "Whoa,
hey, in that neighborhood, I'm not sure," right. And it's because it's like, well, you don't spend time there, so you don't know what's going on, at least from my perspective, and everyone's perspective is a little different.
So asking for a friend, if he came to you and said, Michael, been trying to work on this deal, and I'm trying to build some apartment complexes. I've got think I can put 16 units on here, but I'm really struggling with trying to put all these pieces together. Would you partner with me? Is that something you would consider, or you just say,
on 16 units?
Whatever it might be. Let's just say hypothetically it's 40 units or something.
I mean, right now, we will JV with people. Yes.
That's the question.
Yes. We're definitely, we're in JVs right now, and we would JV again. I think.
And tell us what that would look like too.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's not a cookie cutter answer, but I'll kind of go through the process. I mean, the first thing I'm looking at right now when I look at any deal is opportunity cost. So like I walked a 70 unit repositioning deal in St. Pete last week, and I liked it. I got excited about it, just the deal junkie in me. I went home, I slept on it. I was thinking maybe I could pay X per door, and then I came back and said, wait, opportunity costs, all the time I'm going to have to spend here and all that. If it's not going to be a home run, I'm not interested. So I made them an offer that I felt comfortable would be a home run. The guy said, no, you're dreaming. And I slept great that night because I don't need to do the deal. Yeah. So, I mean, right now for us, it's a bandwidth issue more than anything. I don't want to take on more than we can do, but just hypothetically speaking, take that out of the equation of, hey, I've got the time to look at a deal. We're looking at deal size. I mean, there's a minimal deal size we want to do, which is probably about $10 million. And that would be more on the townhome side, because we haven't talked about that, but we do some townhome development as well.
Owner-occupied stuff.
Yeah. And then, of course, it's the credibility and just character of the partner that you're going to go on. Do I like this person? Do I trust this person? Because you're in a relationship with them on a ground up. Yeah, for a ground up development, at least 3 years from start to finish,
better mesh.
Yeah. So, look at that and then evaluate the deal. And then how we would structure the JV really depends on what they're bringing to the table. Are they bringing capital? Are they bringing experience? Are they bringing personal guarantees? Or, what are they bringing to the table? So there's no kind of cookie cut answer to that. But those are the things that we would look through to come up with a decision.
And your path's been long, from starting out as a broker slinging dirt to now doing these, multi-million-dollar development projects, and all along the way. And you had a really interesting comment when we first started talking that we didn't get on record, but we're going to do that now. What would you do differently?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I would do differently is really think about my opportunity cost. Going back and getting started, and when you'd see a deal like the deal I just talked about, and I went home and slept on it and really thought about it, I wouldn't say I had that same composure, as, I'm excited, this is going to be amazing, let's jump into it. And fortunately for me, pretty much every deal I've done has worked out on some level, but a lot of times to make those deals work, you've had to put a lot more of your time into it, you know, and that's the opportunity cost I'm talking about. So looking at like a historic repurposing of 20 units, I wouldn't start one of those again from the beginning, because that's going through all the challenges of permitting and again, to the contingency cost and time. I know that's not the best use of my time, and I would kind of think through that a little bit more before.
And what about your career path? What would you change? Skip steps?
No, I don't think I'd change anything on the career path. I think, you know, I'd say most of my peers who are in similar positions that I'm in the industry have for the most part, I have a unique track. Most of the time it's someone who, you know, is like a Wharton graduate, business graduate, or something like that, you know, probably a higher level of education than I have, and has gone and worked for an institutional developer or a capital group or a lender, even gained experience that way and kind of built relationships on a corporate level, and then spun off and kind of done their own thing, or are now like the executive level of a large development company. And not to take anything away from those paths, those are like completely impressive, and the knowledge and skill that they bring is incredible. But mine is just a lot different.
Boots on the ground.
But right, we always use the term in the trenches. We're in the trenches developer. I have personally leased over 1,000 units myself.
Wow.
Open doors for, you know, I've sold thousands of units. So I've looked for the dirt myself, negotiated at the table, you know, I've gone to, you know, Sunday dinners to get deals done in churches and this. And so that in the trenches experience is just I think a more unique perspective, and kind of crawling each step of the way. It's a unique perspective that I'm proud of, frankly. I'm proud of it, and I wouldn't change that. You know,
yeah, we are who we are by the experiences that we lived, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's terrific.
Michael, if people want to reach you and talk to you about a deal or contact you, what's the best way they can reach you?
I read all my emails, so that's really the best way to reach me is by email. And you can either go to our website, Site Real Estate, which is SIGHT Real Estate. .com and click contact us, and I get those, or you can just email me personally, which is michael@siterealestate.com.
And tell us what you're looking for right now.
Look, I mean, first of all, you can never have too much capital. I don't care what anybody says. So we're always looking for investors, especially on the high net worth side. I mean, they have to be accredited investors. We're always looking to build our pool. And, of course, we're always looking for deals. But I'd say, like I said, you know, deal wise, we're looking for urban infill townhomes or, apartment deals. I mean, we will look at suburban apartment deals too, if it's in the right submarket. That's really what, I guess, the two things. And I mean, also looking for opportunities to learn and grow relationships, you know, so other people who are just in the business, I have a long-term approach to stuff. So,
terrific. Hey, Michael, this has been terrific. Steve, is there anything else you want to cover before we let Michael go?
No, we covered a lot. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. It's been fun.
And that was Michael Mincberg from Site Real Estate, apartment developer based out of Tampa, Florida, but doing work all up and down the Gulf Coast of the state of Florida. Stephen, great guest. What were your thoughts about Michael's comments?
I like Michael a lot, but one of the things that stuck with me, that impressed me the most, is how, first of all, he's done so much. He's young, but he's humble at the same time. But he emphasized the fact that he got to where he is because he crawled each step of the way. He doesn't walk into a room with ego. He walks into a room being practical and figuring out how he can learn. And from that knowledge, he goes on and builds something.
Yeah, he is who he is from the experiences that he lived. And some of those experiences were tough. He talked about stuff that happened in the Great Recession. He talked about some other issues that sort of helped sculpt him today and has made him a very conservative a multifamily developer. But, he said that's, he wouldn't take any of it back. He feels like he is at the top of his game right now because he has experienced some things that could knock him down a little bit, and he's learned from the experience and moved on. I mean, I thought the thing I took away was a recurrent theme that we get from a lot of our successful guests about relationships. And it's not about just trying to bang a deal. And you hear this from a lot of people in the real estate business. They're trying to flip. They're trying to bang these terms that they use to just indicate transactional activity, which is fine. Sometimes you have to do those things, but Michael's more interested in forming those long-term relationships that will continue to feed each other, that's mutually beneficial. Know me, trust me, like me, do business with me. Relationship game.
Yep, that's what it's all about. So, if you want to hear more great guests like Michael, the place to go is www.investfloridashow.com, where we have a whole library of former podcasts. We've gone on for several years now, so there's a lot of material over there. And also, you can download the podcasts and listen while you're mobile on your phone while you're in the gym or driving.
Guys, as always, we appreciate the time that you invest with us each and every episode. And until next time, hasta la vista.
You've just listened to the Invest Florida podcast with Eric Odom and Steven Silverman. Join us every week for actionable real estate investment ideas, and of course, visit our website at www.investfloridashow.com for more shows and tips on how to earn a cash flow in the real estate market in Florida. While hosts and producers of the Invest Florida show have no reason to doubt the validity of comments of our guests, we do not warranty their accuracy. Please check with your legal, financial, and tax advisors before entering into any investment. Returns will vary from person to person and deal to deal based on unique circumstances. All information expressed in this show is for educational purposes only. Opinions of the guests are not necessarily shared by the hosts and producers of the Invest Florida show.